what most people notice about other people is they notice how well they follow before they notice how well they lead. And so they're picking up on those followership attributes along the way. And so if I have none, or if they're poor, what is the story that we're teaching other people? That's why you get a brilliant jerk in leadership mode. Man, they start teaching other people inadvertently, hey, this is how we do it around here.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. This week, we finish our HRSouthwest highlight series with my friend, Dr. Tony Bridwell. Tony is an organizational behaviorist, prolific author, and a thought leader in employee experience, culture, and leadership development. He is also the Chief Talent Officer for the Encompass Group, where he leads the firm's organizational consulting practice and serves as practice leader of the E3 Leadership Academy. His most recent book is The Follower Effect, a story about flipping the script on leadership. And in addition to emceeing the HR Southwest conference again this year, Tony presented his ideas from the Follower Effect at the conference. Tony last joined me on the podcast in episode 73, where we talked about creating cultures where people thrive. I recommend checking out that evergreen episode. Welcome back to Good Morning HR, Tony.
Man, this is such a joy. Probably the best thing that's happened to me today for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay. And it's only 9 a.m. So good for you. Okay.
I know it. I am so excited. What a great way to start the day. It's 73. Really? It was 73 episode. It seems like
this
it was
is
yesterday.
And I think this is 173. So we're like 100 episodes since. Yeah.
It just seems like it was just episode 150 ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like yesterday. I know. What a great privilege to be back.
Oh, I really appreciate you making the time. So congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
You presented at the Fort Worth HR Strategic Conference about it, and then again at HR Southwest. So I've had a full dose. Explain the follower effect and how it kind of reflects an evolution of your thinking about leadership.
The fact that you have seen it twice and still wanted me on your podcast it speaks volumes for me. I mean, that
misery loves company.
Yeah, well, that's a great compliment. Look, I joke about this all the time, Mike. We talk about this all the time. I am a recovering chief people officer. And so once you're in HR, it kind of sticks on you just a little bit. But my entire experience working with culture and working with HR, there seemed to be this recurring theme that was constantly happening in the background. People would email me or show up in my office, and there was this common theme. I am just fed up to here with Frank. Frank is bugging me all the time. And, I just can't stand Frank. He's so toxic, and Frank's my make-believe person. It could be anybody, right? But, there was always this theme of individuals in the organization that was making it miserable for everybody else in the organization. And so, sadly, what happens over time is, we go to leadership and we say, hey, Frank is really burning the place down. And we would get a similar response. Oh, that's just Frank. And we just kind of brush it off. And so when I started my doctoral program, they said, look, find a topic that you're interested in, that you know a little bit about, and do your study on that. And of course, culture was kind of in my blood a little bit. And that's what we talked about last time we were together. And so part of this conversation was, okay, how do we find out about this toxic individual? Now, we refer to him as the brilliant jerk. And the reason we call him the brilliant jerk is because if they were just a jerk, we'd probably fire him. But because they have some level of, they're the highest producer, they've been around forever, they have a title, they know the secret formula to Coke and they won't tell anybody what it is, they have something. And because they have something, we tend to tolerate them a little bit more than ever. So we've titled them the brilliant jerk. So my research went into discovering where did the brilliant jerk come from and what do we do with them? And along the way, Mike, what I discovered in the research, and we studied 4 global companies, and we started off looking at toxic individuals who happened to be in quote unquote leadership roles. Okay. And what we discovered is those individuals, when they get into that toxic level, they're actually missing some really important attributes. And for generations, we were trying to fix the leadership side of the individual. And what we discovered is that there's actually 2 sides to this coin. We've been studying leadership for 5,000 years. And for the last, 40 years, we've been having this conversation around what it means to be a follower. But we've been studying them, Mike, as separate constructs. You're either this or you're that. A couple of weeks ago, I'm on the campus at UNT here in Dallas, University of North Texas. And I was asked to speak at their distinguished speaker series. And so the dean of the business school interviewed me. And as part of the day on campus, I lectured in a PhD seminar. And so there's 9 PhD students, first year and second year PhD students. And I asked all the students the same question: define a follower. And it's probably not shocking to you because you and I kind of work in the same, industry, and we have these conversations quite a bit. But all 9 of these PhD students defined a follower in the exact same way as somebody who is very passive and sheep-like, who gets behind another person and basically does what they say. And while that falls on an end of the spectrum, it's not the whole spectrum. And what I discovered in the research is that an individual is both leader and follower at any given time. You are both and, right? So you're business owner, you're founder, you're CEO, but at any given time, you have to shift in and out of that leader mode and shift into follower mode. And so it's not like you're always this and always that. You're both and all the time. And so that became very intriguing during the research. And so we kept pulling the thread and kept pulling the thread. And what we discovered is the brilliant jerk, the toxic genius, the individual who just burns the place down, when they're in that mode and we research them, what we discover is that they're completely devoid of any effective followership skills or attributes. Now, we also did the flip side and we looked at transformative leaders. And we asked all these organizations, to define a transformative leader and then tell us about their attributes. And we asked a series of questions. And what we discovered is the highest ranked transformative leader had the highest followership attributes. And what came out of the research is when you allow your followership attributes to atrophy, you're more prone and more likely to become a brilliant jerk. And when you have high followership attributes, you're more prone and more likely to be a transformative leader when in leader mode. Now, also, a byproduct of the study was that we discovered that if your followership attributes are high and strong and effective, that you have more resilience against the brilliant jerk. So in other words, you have a greater resilience, almost an antibody against the individual who is being that brilliant jerk all the time and that toxic individual. However, if your followership ability is low, the brilliant jerk will chew you up and spit you out. Just hands down.
I want to get back to that, but let's talk about, so you said being a follower isn't being that sheep. And, so much of leadership development has to do with, identifying strategy, implementing strategy, selecting employees, developing employees, even building cultures, addressing intrinsic and extrinsic value, motivators, those kind of things. What does it look like to be a follower? If it's not that sheepish end of the spectrum, what are the attributes of the deep end of the swimming pool on being a follower?
It's the right question to ask. The effective follower, there's several attributes, but there's top 3 that we dial in on, and these are the leading indicators, right? So if you have these top 3, you're more likely to be the effective follower. Independent critical thinker, okay, which means that I have the ability to think critically and dig into new ideas. Missionally focused, so focused on the mission, okay? And then active partner. So these are the 3 top. So if you look at that as the effective, if you flip that over and say, okay, the ineffective follower, if independent critical thinking is the effective follower, the ineffective follower is the individual who is very passive. Just tell me what you want me to think and I'll do it. Or someone who's very fixed in their thinking. So in other words, hey, we've never done it that way. That's not how we do it around here. And they get very locked in their thinking and they don't think for themselves and they're very much protect the status quo. If being effective as a follower is focused on the mission, then the ineffective follower becomes very self-focused. It's just about me, what's in it for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if being an active partner is the effective follower, and this was the one that really surprised us in the research, the opposite of being that active partner is actually being an active competitor inside the organization. So, we've probably all interacted with these people at some point in time that everything is a competition. Now, some competition externally focused is very healthy. I mean, hey, we have a competitor to beat in the marketplace and we want to go compete against that competitor in the marketplace. And even to a certain degree, some competition internally can be healthy. But the ineffective follower, when they become the active competitor, it almost becomes to the point that it's combative. And everything is a pushback and everything is, no, that's not how we're going to do it. And everything is, how do I make myself look good and you not look good? Now, a lot of times people say, well, that sounds like leaders that I know. And the answer is yes, it is leaders that you know. But when they're doing that, they're in follower mode when they're doing that.
Explain that. Explain, who are they following?
Yeah, okay. So sometimes this is referred to as what's called shared leadership. And when we switch in and out of these modes, I could get on a call at 9:00 and be as the senior director, or in my current role as chief talent officer, I can get on a call at 9:00 with people on my team, or even with a client and have all the client in there. And at 9:00, I am actually leading the call. And I'm the leader in the room. I'm directing the conversation. I'm directing the content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at some point by 9:15, the CEO may speak up of the client, and I need to shift into follower mode. And the CEO now has that leadership chair. And at any given time, and my new book really goes into a lot of, not the follower effect, but the one I'm writing right now goes into a lot of these dynamics, because when you get into teams, people need to understand how they're shifting in and out of these roles constantly as they go throughout their day. And there has to be this self-awareness that I am not always in the power position. There's times to where I need to be the follower and use my independent critical thinking and be very focused on the goal and be willing to say, I'm in, let's go. Because at some point, I won't make all the decisions. I may hold the title, but I may not make all the decisions. I see this on all the teams that we work on. I sat in New York City with a team and the CEO's in the room and they're getting ready to make a decision. I've been facilitating this conversation all day long. And the CEO said, all right, we need to make a decision on this and move on. And 8 people in the room looked at the CEO ready to make the decision. And she just looked around. And of course, she winked at me because she knew what was getting ready to happen, Mike. Everybody was looking at her to make the decision because she was the highest titled individual in the room. And then she finally just paused and said, no, I don't have the D on this. This is supply chain. Supply chain makes the D. And at that point, she became the follower and supply chain became the leader at that point to make that decision. And then everybody else gets in behind and they slip into that follower mode and they have to support the mission. They have to be an active partner. And they have to use their independent critical thinking to make sure that the best outcome is getting ready to happen. So it's this dynamic of moving in and out, of being the leader and being the follower at any given time as we go throughout our day.
So a lot of it is really about letting your team play to their strengths and trusting them to have the competencies to make the right decisions in different areas and saying and recognizing, I don't have all the answers. I'm not living day to day on supply chain, or I'm not living day to day in operations or whatever.
Yeah.
Saying, okay, so here's the challenge. Let's make sure we define it well and we're all on the same page with what the challenge is. Okay, operations, this is really your call. How do you want to address this? And then everybody else can pipe in if there's challenge, if that's going to create challenges for them.
Well, and that again, that's what it means to be a follower at that point, because I have to use my independent critical thinking to say, okay, have we thought through all the issues that go along with this. But on the passive end of being a follower, that passive end is like, yeah, just whatever you guys decide, I'm just in, right? And that doesn't become very productive. Here's what was really fascinating when we studied this. There's a theory in psychology called social learning theory, and it basically says this. Dr. Albert Bandura has studied this for years. It basically says this, that a large portion, possibly up to 70% of what we learn in life, we actually learn by watching other people. It's this observational learning that goes on. And so when we studied these organizations and we were asking people what they noticed about other people, what was really surprising is that what most people notice about other people is they notice how well they follow before they notice how well they lead. And so they're picking up on those followership attributes along the way. And so if I have none, or if they're poor, what is the story that we're teaching other people? That's why you get a brilliant jerk in leadership mode. Man, they start teaching other people inadvertently, hey, this is how we do it around here.
Yeah, that's what our culture is. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and so at that deep end of being a good follower, I mean, you talk about the passive end, and passive is often matched with the term aggressive. The passive aggressive for, either malicious compliance. Okay, fine. It's a stupid decision. I'm going to do exactly what they tell me and give them the results of it. Or the other end where they're really engaged and they're really seeking out input and building trust in their team to get those answers. They're willing to take the back seat, not be the know-it-all. I mean, and as a career entrepreneur, that's really hard for me. I've my team has taught me over the years how to do it, and I've had an amazing coach for 15 of those years who's helped a lot with that. But I see that attribute. What other attributes really help somebody be a good leader and follower?
Yeah, we would say that it all hinges on a foundation of learning and accountability. Okay, so think of this leader-follower as this cycle that's constantly cycling. And on either bookend of this, what's feeding into the follower is what we refer to as follower capital. It's the psychological engine that keeps you in that good follower mode. And there's 4 key attributes for follower capital. So in other words, the psychological resources that I need to have on a regular basis that kind of keeps me in this mode. Those resources: optimism, hope, resilience, and self-efficacy. Okay. So self-efficacy, I need the confidence that the skills that I have are going to work. Resilience, I have the ability to navigate forward when faced with something that pushes me back. Optimism is interesting. It's the frame in which I see life. You either have a gain frame or a loss frame, right? This gain frame is I see life through what can be gained through an experience, even if I skin my knee, what can be gained through that experience, or I see all of life through a loss frame. It's like, oh, I just had a windfall of $1,000. A loss frame would say, oh yeah, but I got to pay 50% taxes, right? And so that optimism, that I tend to have more of a gain frame optimistic view than a loss frame. And then hope is an interesting one. During COVID, that was the topic I was asked. I gave 52 or 53 keynote speeches virtually during COVID, during 2020. And that's from March to the end of the year. So it wasn't even a full year. And the topic I was asked, there's 2 topics I was asked to speak on the most, and that was resilience and hope. And so hope is a really interesting word, but from a psychological standpoint, hope is this 2-prong approach to life. In order for somebody to be hopeful, there's 2 components. And this is some of the best research out of the University of Oklahoma, Dr. Chad Hellman. He says that you need way power and willpower. Okay, so way power is a word he totally made up, but it's very cool. Way power means that I can see a path forward cognitively. I have a mental map of a path forward. So I see a goal, I have a goal, or I have a path forward. And then willpower is I have the cognitive or mental resources, energy to actually go down that path. Okay, so when both of those are clear and aligned, I am hopeful. Okay, if either one of those gets blocked, then I can become hopeless, right? To the level in which they are blocked. So people who typically feel a sense of hopelessness, when you start to really pull back the curtain, what you'll find is that one of those way power or willpower is blocked. Okay. So, from a psychological resource, if I have high self efficacy, if I have a strong resilience, if I have more of an optimistic lens, and I am more hopeful than not, then that resource feeds my ability to be a stronger follower. That opens up the door for independent critical thinking, being focused on the mission, and being an active partner. So that becomes a very important part. So that feeds that engine. So if you just think about this, that feeds that engine going in. Now, in order for that psychological resource, that follower capital, to really have fuel, you got to have EQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
So EQ becomes a really important part. So just so we don't take for granted, everybody knows the emotional intelligence that comes along with that, which means I need to be aware of my emotions. I need to be able to manage my emotions. I need to be able to read the room and the emotions in the room, and then I need to be able to manage relationships. So that becomes a really important precursor to have this good psychological capital that drives my ability to be an effective follower. And now I'm in. Now, if you think about that, it's moving from left to right. Now I've hit that follower box. And right next to that follower box is the leader box. And these two boxes are they're connected. There's a constant circle going on. These boxes are connected. And what connects those two boxes is learning and accountability. So my ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and be accountable internally and externally. And this is where accountability really gets a bad rap. As a follower, I have an internal accountability, which is my personal responsibility to own my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we all have stuff, right? I got to own my stuff. That's my internal responsibility. When I move into leader mode, I have an external accountability to establish what needs to happen and set people up for success in a way that creates two-way accountability. And so a lot of times you hear, well, as a leader, I just need to hold people accountable. And that's missing some components. And so when you understand the balance of accountability, as a follower, I have this internal responsibility to own my stuff. And as a leader, I have this external responsibility to set people up for success so that they can be successful, meaning I need to establish clear expectations as part of it. And so that accountability, it creates a loop. And in that process, you have to be in learning mode. And so we would say there's 3 principles to keep you in learning mode that helps keep it's like the glue that holds us together. These are 3 simple principles. And you've heard these before, so you could probably quote them if I put you to the test, but I won't do that to you.
Good, because I probably fell asleep. But
yeah, maybe at this part. Principle number 1, never assume that everybody knows what you know at the level that you know. Principle number 2, never assume you know all there is to know. Give yourself permission to be curious. And principle number 3, never confuse knowing with understanding. There's a gap. Knowing is just having knowledge. Understanding is being able to connect the intent of that knowledge and what I do with that. So that's the glue that holds this leader follower dance of sorts. It's the glue that holds them together. If that happens, then what that produces is what's called leader capital, right? So follower capital feeds good followership. And if you have good, solid followership, then what should be coming out the other side externally is what's referred to as leader capital. And leader capital is this idea that I have a level of competence, that I have a level of character that is consistent and compassionate. And so those 4 attributes they start to manifest. And that's how I know that from a leader standpoint, I'm manifesting my most effective leader is that I show up with a high level of competence, self-efficacy, right? I have a character that is character could be a whole nother podcast. We should do a whole podcast on just character, Mike, because it's really fascinating. But if you look at character, it's the moral compass that produces integrity in what we do on a regular basis. A lot of people say it's who you are when no one's looking. And yes, that's true, but it's also absolutely who you are when someone's looking, right? But there also needs to be a level of consistency. I can't tell you how many times I've had this happen in my career. Somebody come up to me, they're getting ready to walk into a meeting, they'll pull me aside and say, "Hey, I'm getting ready to go present. What kind of mood's the boss in?" Right? Because there's this inconsistency of the emotion that the boss has. So there would be a level of consistency that people would have. And then there's this level of compassion. Effective leaders that are also effective followers, because they're fueled by good EQ, have this level of compassion that comes with it. All four of those items are precursors to trust and foundational to produce psychological safety. So it works as a system. The follower effect is just that system, that's bracketed system of all those components and all those nits and bits working together that creates the best version of all of ourselves.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. At Imperative, we have 3 core values, one of which is always act in the best interest of our client. To ensure that we do that, we focus on keeping 3 promises to our clients. First, we choose our team's competencies over technology, AI, or algorithms. Our research and the information we provide our clients is always guided by our professional analysts, augmented by, but never substituted with, technology. And second, because our processes are thorough, our compliance is strict, and our staff cares, our clients can fearlessly take action based on the information we provide. And finally, when the phone rings or the email chimes, our team answers and solves our clients' issues immediately with fast and friendly service. Those are our promises to our clients, and it would be an honor to extend them to you. You can learn more about how Imperative serves our clients at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 173 and enter the keyword follower. That's FOLLOWER. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Dr. Tony Bridwell. And so you were talking about leadership and followership being next to each other. But I'm wondering if really those two together are in a box together called good leadership, and then just having a title and being in charge of people is bad leadership. And so really those two are so intertwined.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned emotional intelligence, and I'm sure you have, and I have worked with plenty of leaders who were low EQ and couldn't understand why their organization was foundering. And you're looking at their team and like, there's only one reason. Everybody on this team's great except for you. I mean,
Right.
There's one person at the table who's in the wrong seat in their current disposition. I think there's a self-awareness that's required there, and that's part of EQ, and the ability to be humble. And entrepreneurs, executives feel a lot of pressure, I think, to know all the answers all the time and be that person. And I think we've seen that in failed military exercises. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it in a lot of places where it's gone wrong.
Yes.
Because that one person felt the need to be the expert in everything.
Right. Principle number 2, never assume you know all there is to know. You got to give yourself permission to be curious. So I would ask you, what kind of pressure, what's going on in their brain? What goes on in an individual's brain that puts them in the mode that they believe that they have to know everything? What do you think's going on in their brain?
I've got to prove that I've got the competencies to be in this role.
Yep.
I can't let my people have any fear of the reality of our circumstances. I've got to protect them from that. I've got to reassure them. I've got to, go, hit one for the Gipper kind of thing. Those kind of thoughts really probably at its core, a level of self-doubt and inability to grasp any place that you don't feel fully competent in whatever's facing you.
That's it. And normally it comes from low self-efficacy, resilience that may not be exactly at the level that it needs to be. My optimism is a little rusty. And from a standpoint of hope, I'm kind of in and out of being very hopeful. And everything that you just ticked off is so common. We see it in all of our coaching clients that we work with when we do executive coaching. It's one of the very first items that we have to address. What's the tape playing in their head? Because if that tape is, I have to have all the answers, they're going to struggle. Because no one can have all the answers, but yet we have this belief. And what's crazy is I don't know of any situation, it's probably out there, but in my 30 years of doing this, I haven't come across one yet to where somebody's been promoted and the person promoting them has said, well, welcome to the C-suite. You better have all the answers. I just haven't come up with that. But for some reason, people still walk into the C-suite or whatever role it is. It could be anything. I could be being promoted to senior director or senior manager. And I have yet to find someone say, well, welcome to your new role. You better have all the answers. But yet we walk into these roles with that belief, I better have all these answers.
Well, and I think there's a lot of organizations where the higher you move up the org chart, the more you feel like you're tiptoeing through a minefield.
Yes.
That, the internal, it's the culture, it's the internal competition, not to be our best, but the internal competition to survive or to curry favor with whoever the leadership is, or even at the board level. And so I can't show weakness. I've got to be, even when the other guy's right, I have to find a way to undermine him or one-up him or whatever to demonstrate that.
Yeah.
So you talk about personal growth and in this process and that reflect, grow, act model that you've got. Talk about that, because I think that's a really good way to close it and how we learn and mull over, what's happened and grow from it.
It's a very simple model that I wrote about in the book that it plays two roles. One, it's a learning model, but it's also a very, very effective a personal accountability model. And the model is reflect, rethink, and act. And for reflect, and you just simply go through, it's a framework, right? So you just kind of think of it as a circle, a cycle. But, at the end of my meeting, at the end of my day, I do this anytime I give a presentation or whatever. I'll do this after we're done with the podcast. And I take a few minutes and I just simply reflect. I reflect on what happened. I make sure I own the story. I tend to ask myself a couple of questions when I'm reflecting. I ask what emotions that I felt, high or low. And I ask, what about my energy? Was my energy high or low? That gets the reflection juices kind of going for me. Mm-hmm. Everybody does it a little different. And then once I reflect, I'm always trying to identify, when I get to this idea of rethink, I always try to identify, did I come out of that with any beliefs that might be limiting or holding me back? Because if that's the case, then I might need to reframe a belief. But if my emotions were high and if my energy was high, then when I get to rethink, what I'm going to wrestle with is, what do I need to reinforce? What went really well that I might need to do again? And so rethinking is this idea of, is there something that I need to reframe in order to, not skin my knee again, to be better the next time, or whatever the case may be. And then I act. And acting is, what's the best next step? It's not, how do I get all the way to the end? So many people make this mistake, Mike, that they think, okay, I got to do this and I got to get all the way to the end. You just need to think about, what's the best next step? What do I just do next? And then when I do that, I reflect and rethink and act, and it becomes an ongoing cycle. And I'm constantly going through this. Reframing is something I've been having a lot of conversations. Matter of fact, just recently I posted something on LinkedIn about this. My students, I had a student come up to me. I teach an MBA class at SMU, and one of my students came up to me, and we had this conversation about reframing this, reflect and rethink. And they got to the reframe part, and they pulled me aside at lunch, and they said, Dr. Bridwell, that when I get to this idea of reframing, sometimes I feel like I'm lying to myself. And the broadest sense, Mike, is when people reframe. A real broad general example would be, I'm having a really sad day. I'm really sad today. And so, just reframe that and tell yourself you're happy. And, there's a lot of psychology behind this that says that you actually don't want to do that. I've had to come back and apologize to all my children because I told them growing up saying, you just need to tell yourself you're happy. And in reality, I was screwing them up just a little bit because that leads to what's referred to as toxic positivity. And reframing is not about ignoring or denying whatever it is that you're feeling, but it's about shifting your perspective enough to be able to move forward. And so, if I said and reflect and I realize, man, my day just sucks, I'm just really sad. The reframe is, hey, parts of my day sucked less than other parts of my day and weren't as sad, and I wasn't as sad at those moments. So my whole day wasn't sad, but parts of my day were less sad. And that little reframe, that little tweak prevents me from getting pulled into a vortex. And so that little tweak allows me to move just a little bit further and a little bit further to take the best next step forward. And so reframing isn't about, denying the fact that you're feeling a certain way, but it is about finding the perspective that allows you to move forward.
The late, great Nancy Starr was my coach for years. And she would always say on that note, what else could be true?
Mm-hmm.
Hit that obstacle, that way you're thinking about things, yes. There's no hope, or I'm at a dead end, or this person's useless, or they screwed me on purpose, whatever it is. What else could be true?
That's
and
so
reframing
powerful.
that circumstance. And, I'm pretty dense, but that's the one thing that comes to mind constantly from all my time with Nancy was, and she passed away about 6 years ago, but is that constant asking of myself, okay, I'm feeling this very strongly,
right.
And it's an obstacle to me moving forward. What else could be true? And then, like you say, rethinking that, processing that. Okay, right. If I really want to give this other person benefit of the doubt,
yeah,
or if all my experience shows me that I really am competent in this area, or whatever, what else could be true?
Right.
And it's made a giant difference in me.
That's huge. So, yeah.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you joining us. We're up at time, but I definitely want to get you back. I think that would be a great conversation.
Do I have to wait 100 episodes, Mike?
No. I promise.
I
will not make I know you want it. It'll be but a minute to you, but to our listeners, I would not deprive them of that. So let's get together and have another conversation in the spring about character. I think that'd be a great conversation.
Huge. We need to have more of those conversations for sure.
And you can find Tony's contact information and a link to buy his book in the show notes or at goodmorninghr.com. And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And by the way, Rob got married last week. Congratulations, buddy. It's always good to get that first one out of the way. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Mary Ann Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week. And until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.